How do you go from being one of the hottest stars in women's wrestling and being one of the biggest success stories in AEW to becoming just another face in the crowd? In her AEW run, Mariah May looked unstoppable. She was involved in arguably the best women's storyline in wrestling alongside Toni Storm. She won championships. She was featured prominently on television. Fans were talking about her every single week. But now, ever since arriving in WWE, the conversation has changed. Instead of dominating the women's division, we've seen weeks of video packages, hype segments, and promises about the future. Meanwhile, the momentum that made Mariah May feel special has started to cool off. And that's led many fans to ask one simple question: did Mariah May leave AEW too soon? Let's talk about it, man. Before we talk about WWE, we need to talk about just how successful Mariah May became in AEW. Because this wasn't a wrestler struggling to find her place. This wasn't someone lost in the shuffle. This was someone who was becoming one of the biggest stars in the entire company. When Mariah May first arrived in AEW, she was introduced as the biggest fan of Toni Storm. At first glance, it seemed like a simple storyline, but what followed became one of the most entertaining character arcs in modern wrestling. Week after week, fans watched Mariah May become more obsessed with Toni Storm. The relationship evolved, the tension grew, the storytelling became deeper, and eventually it exploded into betrayal. Suddenly, Mariah May wasn't just another wrestler on the roster. She was one of the most talked about acts in AEW. Every appearance felt important. Every promo mattered. Every segment pushed the story forward. That's how stars are made. Not through endless hype videos, not through social media posts, but through meaningful television. And here's where things get really interesting. Because you can make the argument that Toni Storm helped elevate Mariah May into a completely different level of a star. The chemistry was undeniable. The promos worked. The character work worked. The matches delivered. Everything clicked. In wrestling, sometimes you find a rivalry that creates magic. And that's exactly what happened. The story wasn't just about championships. It was about obsession, jealousy, betrayal, revenge. Fans became emotionally invested. That's the key. People weren't watching because they wanted to see moves. They were watching because they wanted to see what happened next. That's why the storyline became such a success. And that's why many fans believe Toni Storm was absolutely right when she constantly warned everyone that Mariah May was dangerous and manipulative. In storyline terms, Toni Storm saw what was coming before anyone else did. And that eventually led to one of AEW's most memorable women's feuds. Then came the biggest decision of Mariah May's career, leaving AEW. And look, let's be fair, nobody can blame a wrestler for exploring new opportunities. WWE is the biggest wrestling company in the world. The exposure is massive, the platform is enormous, the money is often life-changing. From a business perspective, the move makes sense. But wrestling isn't just about signing contracts, it's about momentum, and momentum is something you can lose very quickly. That's where the concern started, because after arriving in WWE, fans expected immediate impact. Instead, what they got was weeks of anticipation, weeks of build-up, weeks of video packages, weeks of waiting. And while those vignettes were professionally produced, some fans began asking an important question. When does the actual push begin? Because eventually, hype videos stop creating excitement. At some point, fans want action. They want matches. They want storylines. They want reasons to care. And this is where the comparison becomes unavoidable. AEW's Mariah May felt like a main character. WWE's Blake Monroe still feels like a work in progress. In AEW, she immediately became part of a major storyline. In WWE, the presentation has been far more cautious. Now, that doesn't automatically mean WWE is doing something wrong. Different companies have different philosophies, but fans notice these things. They notice when someone who was constantly featured suddenly isn't. They notice when a star goes from headline storylines to waiting for directions. And that's what has sparked so much debate online, because the version of Mariah May that fans remember from AEW felt larger than life. She felt important. She felt dangerous. She felt like somebody who could walk into any arena and steal the show. Many fans are still waiting to see the same energy fully return in WWE. Now let's address the elephant in the room. The argument that Mariah May should have never left AEW. And honestly, I can understand why some fans would feel that way. In AEW, she already had momentum. She already had character development. She already had established rivalries. She already had fan investment. Leaving meant starting over. And starting over is never easy, especially when you're entering a company with an already crowded women's division. Every week, there are new stars fighting for television time. Every week, there are new storylines competing for attention. Nothing is guaranteed. That's why some fans believe Mariah May left at the exact moment her stock was at its highest, and now she's having to rebuild everything from scratch. Whether that's fair or not, that's the perception many viewers have right now. But here's the truth. It's still too early to write the final chapter, because wrestling changes fast. One great storyline can change everything. One unforgettable promo can change everything. One championship opportunity can change everything. The real question isn't whether Mariah May was better in AEW. The real question is whether WWE can eventually make Blake Monroe feel as important as Mariah May felt in her peak at AEW. And that's the challenge. That's the exception. And that's what fans are going to be watching closely over the next year. Because if Blake Monroe eventually reaches the next level, then the move to WWE will have been worth it. But if the momentum continues to cool, people are going to keep asking the same question. Did Mariah May leave AEW at the worst possible time? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Was Mariah May better off staying in AEW? Or will Blake Monroe eventually become a bigger star in WWE than she ever was before? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.